Welcome to the debate. Today, we're returning to a really fascinating re-examination, something first explored over on NeonKore Media's The Deep Dive. That's Daniel Bates's radical reimagination of the Peter Pan story in The Boy Who Stole Time. Bates offers a truly provocative lens on a narrative many of us thought we knew inside out. Our central question for this discussion is really this. Does Daniel Bates's The Boy Who Stole Time primarily serve as a, let's say, profound psychological allegory, warning against the dangers of arrested development and unexamined control? Or, on the other hand, does it risk sacrificing the inherent wonder of eternal youth for a stark, almost punitive vision of unavoidable maturation? I personally believe Bates delivers a powerful allegorical critique, one that compels us to reevaluate our notions of growth.
And I'll be exploring whether Bates' vision, which is, I agree, undeniably impactful, might actually impose a singular, darker interpretation, one that perhaps overlooks other valuable, maybe more nuanced perspectives on eternal youth, potentially stripping away some of its traditional allure. It's certainly a compelling and, frankly, unsettling reinterpretation.
Right. Bates' The Boy Who Stole Time is, I think, at its core, a profound psychological allegory. He masterfully transforms Neverland from that idyllic, carefree paradise we all sort of remember into what he describes as a gilded cage or even a self-sustaining psychological loop. Now, this isn't just a backdrop. It's really a manifestation of Peter Pan's deep-seated existential fear. Fear of aging, of change, and ultimately of death itself. Peter, far from the whimsical child, emerges here as a tyrant of youth. His iconic charm in this particular telling is revealed as a carefully constructed facade masking a deeply manipulative need for control. He systematically erases the Lost Boys' memories, effectively making nostalgia a weapon to keep them, hollowed out and perpetually trapped in his own delusion. This fundamentally redefines Neverland not as a place of freedom, but one of profound psychological stagnation. And within this framework, Captain Hook, whose true name is James, rises as the narrative's true, albeit maybe reluctant hero. His very existence is defined by a clockwork heart, which is actually a fragment of Peter's own time-bending magic. And this, paradoxically, makes him a radical act of acceptance of time. Hook's mission isn't just simple revenge. It's framed as a redemption quest, a quest to liberate the Lost Boys from Peter's dictatorial fear and offer them the essential, often messy, journey of embracing growth. And the taking crocodile, that famous image, rather than symbolizing Hook's fear, becomes the physical manifestation of time itself, a constant, relentless reminder of Peter's deepest dread, signifying that his frozen kingdom just cannot endure. This entire narrative becomes a powerful reevaluation of what it means to truly live a complete life. And it's perfectly captured by Bates's own really resonant summary. To grow up is not to lose wonder. It's to remember how precious time truly is.
Okay, while I absolutely agree that the psychological depth and the complexity Bates brings to The Boy Who Stole Time are both undeniable and compelling, I do find myself questioning if this reimagining risks presenting an overly stark, maybe almost punitive view of maturation. It potentially diminishes the inherent wonder and the traditional sense of liberation we've often associated with eternal youth. Bates' concept of Neverland as a dream prison and the Lost Boys as, quote, victims of trauma because of their erased memories, while powerfully unsettling, it does lean very heavily into a singular, dark psychological framework. And this framework overlays a story that, for generations, has also resonated with a very human desire for, timeless joy and innocent adventure.
And consider Hook's redemption quest.
While, yes, noble in its intent to free the Lost Boys, it culminates in a truly brutal act, unleashing time itself, causing them to age instantly in this chaotic, confusing flood of years. The sudden, violent cost of freedom is deeply traumatic. It raises a critical question for me. Is this forced maturation really liberation, or is it maybe just a different, perhaps equally scarring form of trauma? The narrative itself even hints at this complexity, noting that not everyone leaves Neverland and that some actually choose to stay, being too scared of the real world. This suggests that the perceived freedom from Peter's rule might be terrifying in its own right, and crucially, not universally desirable.
Furthermore, while Peter Pan's motivations are indeed rooted in a deep, crippling fear of death, framing him as a possessive, godlike entity who traps everyone in this soft-focused nightmare leaves very little room for ambiguity in the concept of eternal youth itself. It almost paints it as inherently negative rather than maybe a more complex, perhaps even appealing choice for some individuals.
I understand your concern about the starkness, but I think Bates is quite deliberate in stripping away any false romanticism from Neverland. He explicitly describes its true nature as a decaying, dream-like, soft-focused nightmare. It's not presented as a paradise that turns dark. The darkness, the kind of rot, was always fundamental to its existence as a prison, as a construct of Peter's fear. The unnatural stillness, leaves never falling, the sun eternally hovering, isn't meant to be quaint. It's genuinely horrifying. It represents a complete halt of natural cycles, of life itself. Any beauty it possesses is precisely part of the insidious manipulation Peter wields. That facade makes the trap more effective, turning what should be innocent memories and desires, nostalgia, into a weapon against the boys. It's a compelling illusion, sure, but it's designed specifically to prevent any genuine growth or change. It's a form of unexamined control that systematically denies them agency.
Right. I see what you're saying about the manipulation, and I do acknowledge the profound psychological depth of Peter's control. However, I still have to ask, does this complete erasure of any genuine, whimsical elements within Neverland maybe go too far? Even if it's a beautiful prison, as Bates suggests, doesn't that imply there were, at some point, elements of actual beauty or fleeting enchantment? If the soft-focused nightmare is so absolute from the start, does it risk making Peter's control almost, too simplistic? Does it negate any initial allure that might have drawn the Lost Boys in the first place? Bates himself alludes to an initial whimsical vibe and a perfect memory trapped in amber before Peter's true nature is fully revealed. Doesn't that suggest perhaps a more nuanced beginning, where some genuine, if temporary, joy was possible before the decay fully set in?
Well, I'd argue that initial allure is the bait. It's the very mechanism for Peter to draw in vulnerable children, often those, experiencing trauma or neglect in the real world. The enchantment is never presented as genuine in the sense of true freedom or personal growth. It's a meticulously maintained illusion of eternal play, precisely calibrated to mask profound psychological stagnation. So it's not really about Peter creating a beautiful place. It's more about him desperately trapping a moment in time, his own idealized moment. And that very act of trapping, of freezing time, is what inevitably causes it to decay, turning it into this dream prison. The beauty then is purely superficial. It's the gilded aspect of the cage, you see, making the confinement more appealing on the surface, but fundamentally hollow, and ultimately deeply detrimental. It's really a testament to the power of that specific kind of manipulation.
Okay, if Neverland itself is such an insidious trap, then your point about Hook's methods, I think, becomes even more critical. You frame Hook as an absolute hero, but I find myself deeply concerned by the cost of freedom he offers, which is, as we've said, undeniably traumatic. His mission, despite its arguably noble intent, involves a truly brutal transformation for the Lost Boys. Bates describes it vividly as psychological whiplash, with years, decades flickering across their faces. I mean, this instant aging and the subsequent chaos, even if it leads to memory retrieval, presents a difficult, almost violent path to liberation. How can we fully embrace his heroism when the immediate consequence is such profound psychological destabilization? And what about the narrative's own acknowledgement that not everyone leaves Neverland, with some choosing to stay, explicitly too scared of the real world? This strongly suggests that freedom isn't an easy or universally chosen path, which for me complicates the idea of Hook's unadulterated heroism. Is it truly a free choice when the alternative for those who do accept is this sudden, jarring, and psychologically destabilizing aging? It feels almost like a new form of trauma rather than, say, a gentle awakening.
That's a compelling point, and it does force us to confront the difficult realities of what Peter has done. However, I would frame this trauma not as Hook's creation, but as an unavoidable, albeit harsh, consequence of Peter's profound theft of time. Hook's role isn't to provide some gentle transition. It's to restore what was stolen, to dismantle a deeply ingrained lie. Bates explicitly states Hook's goal isn't merely to fight Peter, but to dismantle the myth of eternal youth itself, and to show the Lost Boys the raw, often unsettling truth of reality. The choice for some to stay indeed highlights the depth of Peter's indoctrination. Yes, I agree there. But Hook's offering of that fundamental choice, his shattering of the illusion itself, is inherently liberating, however difficult the immediate re-entry into reality might be. Hook's own existence, remember, marked by his physical scar, the hook, is a permanent reminder of Peter's cruelty and the violent price of daring to defy him. His mission is ultimately to undo that wrong, to restore not just lost time, but true agency and the capacity for genuine life, however imperfect that life might be.
I understand the argument that it's an unavoidable consequence, but the impact of that return is so sudden and overwhelming. It feels less like an offering of agency and maybe more like a forced reality, a kind of violent shock treatment. It seems to introduce a new form of trauma, rather than simply resolving the old one. It's just hard for me to call it an entirely free choice, when the path offered is immediate, jarring, and psychologically destabilizing, even if it's what Peter's actions made necessary. It feels like it undermines the idea of a gentle, natural acceptance of time, replacing it with this acute, distressing experience that Bates presents as the only way out. It feels, like a punitive aspect of maturation embedded right within the narrative structure.
And this brings us squarely to the nature of Peter Pan himself in this version. From Bates's perspective, there seems to be very little room for ambiguity. Peter is unequivocally presented as a tyrant, driven by that deep, crippling fear of death. He uses his immense, almost godlike power to force others into his delusion, to keep his world unnaturally static. Bates' description of Peter having eyes that hold centuries, that implies an ancient, profound terror that has corrupted him into this possessive, godlike entity. His actions, they're born from a desperate, all-consuming clinging to control, making him a villain whose tyranny stems from existential fear, not, genuine concern for the Lost Boys' happiness. His iconic charm, as we discussed earlier, is merely that carefully constructed facade to hide this profound insecurity and his deeply manipulative nature. Bates really forces us to confront the dangers of unchecked personal fear leading to the systematic oppression of others.
I come at it from maybe a slightly different angle. While Peter's tyrannical actions and the fear driving them are, yes, undeniable, Bates also offers a glimpse of something perhaps more tragic. He describes Peter at the climax as, quote, not evil, just a boy terrified. Now, this suggests a figure whose villainy, however profound its consequences might be, originates from a deeply relatable, almost universal human fear of mortality, rather than pure malice. It makes me wonder if the narrative, by focusing so heavily on his tyrannical actions, risks over-demonizing this universal human desire, the desire to avoid aging and death, without sufficiently exploring the why behind it, beyond just simple fear. Could there be a more nuanced reading of Peter's motivations, perhaps a deeper psychological layer to his specific terror that Bates might not fully lean into, something that makes him more fundamentally tragic than simply a straightforward tyrant? Bates himself identifies Peter's fear of growing up as a kind of disease, which implies a highly personal and deeply rooted perception, almost a pathology, rather than just a straightforward choice for malice.
The fight aspect doesn't, in my view, negate his tyranny. In fact, his profound fear fuels his oppressive control. It's precisely that deep terror that compels him to rob others of their lives, their memories, their very identities. Bates' focus seems very much on the consequences of that fear, which are undeniably tyrannical and incredibly harmful. It's a powerful allegorical statement, I think, on how deeply personal anxieties, when unchecked and coupled with immense power, can lead to profound subjugation and the oppression of others. So the nuanced reading of his motivation is that it stems from a profound existential fear, absolutely, but the actions resulting from that fear are what ultimately define his villainy in the story and make him such a potent antagonist.
The narrative really forces us to confront how personal pathos can become societal oppression. So, in conclusion, Daniel Bates' The Boy Who Stole Time undeniably stands as a vital psychological allegory. It urges us to profoundly re-examine the dangers of, well, cultural and personal stagnation. It powerfully reframes our understanding of the Peter Pan myth, unequivocally asserting that true fulfillment and wonder lie not in some enforced unchanging youth, but actually in the courageous embrace of the full spectrum of human experience, and that includes growth, change, and even mortality. It's a significant reevaluation, not just a simple retelling.
I certainly agree that Bates's reimagining holds undeniable power and depth, particularly in its very astute exploration of fear and control. However, I do continue to maintain that it presents a stark, perhaps almost unyielding vision of growth. While incredibly impactful, it might inadvertently overshadow the enduring and perhaps still valuable wonder and sense of liberation that the concept of eternal youth has traditionally offered in literature and myth. The narrative's strong emphasis on trauma as the primary pathway to freedom provides a compelling but ultimately quite singular perspective. And for some, that might make the idea of perpetual youth seem inherently negative, rather than just a complex, maybe even understandable choice or state.
Regardless of our differing perspectives on its ultimate message, though, Daniel Bates's work undeniably offers a rich, complex lens through which to re-examine these familiar narratives. It's really a testament to the power of creative reinterpretation, isn't it?
Absolutely. It prompts profound questions about freedom, about memory, and about the very journey of being human. It invites us all to look beyond the surface of stories we thought we knew and to consider the deeper implications hidden within these timeless tales.
And this discussion, I feel, really only scratches the surface of the intricate layers Daniel Bates has woven into this and indeed his other works. It definitely invites further exploration into his unique creative vision.